As I've spoken about previously on this channel, the environment where a record is made can completely change the vibe of the sound. From Abbey Road to Electric Lady, there are so many iconic studios around the world that have their walls embedded within the sounds of popular music. However, the ability to take the equipment on the road has allowed for not only live albums to be recorded, but for an album to be created in a space previously unimaginable. From Muddy Waters' front porch to the River Thames, today we're going to look at some incredible moving recording studios and the locations that they allowed albums to be created in. If you enjoy the video and want to help me justify spending time researching interesting music topics, then please do consider subscribing or leave a comment below about any topics you'd like me to discuss in the future. And now for 5 portable music studios. 1. Station to Station. The artist Doug Aitken created the Station to Station project, which saw a kinetic light structure in the form of a specially designed train traveling across America to 10 different locations in 2013, as well as a different festival happening at each stop on the train's tour with music, art installation, and live performances. Producer Justin Stanley suggested that the Station to Station project should have a recording studio in one of the train's carriages. Stanley said of the journey, quote, "The train was about 7 cars. It was beautiful. There was a storage car, 2 accommodation cars, Levi's had a car full of denim. There was a media car full of computers, they were filming everything, and they had edit bays in the media car and were editing film as they were going. And then in the next car was the recording studio." The studio was put together by Stanley in just 3 days. What started as an empty train carriage quickly became a studio with the equipment either bolted down or velcroed in place. Embracing the environment in which they were recording, rather than trying to minimize the noise made by the train, Stanley would hang a microphone out of the moving train window to capture as much of the ongoing ambience as possible. Artists such as Sonic Youth, Thurston Moore, Beck, Cat Power, Jackson Browne, and Mavis Staples were all part of either the performance or the studio recording sessions during the event. Stanley said of it afterwards, "The greatest thing of all about the whole adventure is that it really brought the art of simplicity to the whole process. You don't need a lot to make the right record. You need a vibe. You need people who are into it." 2. Ronnie Lane's LMS. Ronnie Lane, for those who don't know, was the bassist and co-founder of The Faces, a band featuring other icons such as Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood. Lane acquired the mobile recording studio in 1972, and it just so happened to be one of the very first of its kind. He named it the LMS, Lane's Mobile Studio. It is a stunning example of retrofuturism, looking like it's straight out of Lost in Space or Doctor Who. Although it does also kind of look like somewhere that I might buy chips from at 2 in the morning on a night out. However, it was actually a recording studio, and it created iconic albums such as The Who's Quadrophenia and Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti. Obviously, the main advantage of a studio like this is that you can record anywhere you want, which is why it's the perfect setup for live albums, and it was used on Eric Clapton's Rainbow concert, and Rory Gallagher's Irish Tour 74, amongst many others. But not only this, the LMS was taken to a bell factory in Loughborough to record a giant 1-ton bell for AC/DC's song Hell's Bells. However, the bell that they had commissioned for the recording and to be able to take on tour with them was still in the process of being created, so they tried out a local church bell instead. The sound engineer Tony Platt tells the story of how, quote, "After placing microphones in the belfry, I discovered that what no one had considered were the birds living inside there. As soon as the bell was hit, the first thing we'd hear was this mad fluttering of wings as pigeons flew away. Then by the time the bell stopped ringing enough for us to hit it again, all of the birds had returned." Eventually, they were able to use the commissioned 1-ton bell, which was then pitched down for the recording, meaning that the bell that you hear on the studio version is actually an octave lower than the bell used on the AC/DC live tour. Lane sold the LMS in 1982, and it has since been kept in private collections. 3. David Gilmour's Astoria. Astoria was a houseboat constructed in 1911. It was purchased by Pink Floyd's David Gilmour in 1986 after seeing it in Country Life magazine shortly after he had noticed it whilst driving past. His reasoning for turning the houseboat into a recording studio was because he, quote, "Spent half of my life in recording studios with no windows, no lights, but on the boat there are many windows with beautiful scenery on the outside. The whole boat is 90 foot long, with the control room being an impressive 30 foot by 20 foot alongside 3 bedrooms, a kitchen and a bathroom. During the BBC show Three Men in a Boat, Dara O'Brien, Griff Rhys-Jones and Rory McGrath paid Astoria and Gilmour himself a visit, which actually gives us a really cool insight onto how the studio looks on the inside. The last 3 Pink Floyd albums were recorded there, as well as the last 2 Gilmour solo albums. Docked on the River Thames next to Garrick's Temple to Shakespeare, there is actually a video of Gilmour performing Shakespeare's famous sonnet 18, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, whilst on board Astoria. It's an insanely inspiring location to record in, and I'm sure it comes with the peaceful ambience of the River Thames in the background. 4. Rolling Stones Mobile Recording Studio. The most iconic mobile recording studio, not just on this list, but perhaps of all time, is the Rolling Stones Mobile Recording Studio. Through its long history and its ability to move around the world, the studio has created albums for Led Zeppelin, Fleetwood Mac, Bob Marley, Neil Young, Deep Purple, Dire Straits, Santana, The Who, Iron Maiden, The Ramones, and of course the Rolling Stones themselves, amongst many, many other artists. Similar to the LMS discussed earlier, the studio was used for both live albums and studio recordings. The studio is immortalized in the lyrics of perhaps the most famous guitar riff of all time, Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple. The studio was set up next to the casino in Montreux, Switzerland, as a fire broke out during a Frank Zappa concert there. Luckily, the studio survived and went on to be referenced in the Deep Purple song, which was about this event. The opening lyrics are, "We all came out to Montreux to make records with a mobile," and is later referenced in the song as the Rolling Truck Stones thing. The lyrics of the whole song generally are about the fire at the casino during the Frank Zappa concert, with the lyrics bluntly stating, "Frank Zappa and the Mothers were at the best place around, but some stupid with a flare gun burned the place to the ground." As I discussed in another video, which I'll link either above and or below, Led Zeppelin used the Rolling Stones mobile recording studio so that they could live, write and record at Headley Grange during their 3rd and 4th albums. The studio was initially created due to the Stones not wanting to be confined to working in a recording studio and in the usual working day pattern. They wanted to be able to record at Mick Jagger's Stargroves country estate, but rather than lugging all of the necessary equipment there, the band's pianist and road manager Ian Stewart suggested just building a control room into a truck so that they could drive it there. The Who's iconic Won't Get Fooled Again was recorded with the mobile studio whilst it was here at Mick Jagger's estate. The Stones themselves then recorded multiple albums whilst the mobile recording studio was there, including tracks from the album Sticky Fingers and It's Only Rock and Roll. They also started on the iconic Exile on Main Street album, but quickly had to flee the country when they'd accidentally spent all of the tax money owed to the British government. They then moved the truck over to France before the government had a chance to seize their assets. They went to a villa near Nice rented by Keith Richards to finish making the album. The studio was eventually sold to the Stones' bassist Bill Wyman in 1987, who created the Ambition, Invention, Motivation, Success project, which fortunately shortens down to the AIMS project. An awesome platform designed to be able to give young bands a chance to create a high-quality demo in an iconic environment. Incredibly, roughly 60 tracks were created for young and upcoming bands during this time. The truck was acquired by the National Music Centre in Alberta, Canada in 2001, where it still resides today as a museum piece. 5. Muddy Waters Car Boot. One of the earliest examples of a portable recording studio I could find was used to record the father of Chicago blues himself, Muddy Waters. In 1941, the ethnomusicologist and director of the Archive of American Folk Song, Alan Lomax, was tasked by the United States Library of Congress to record various blues musicians as a historical record. Right at the start of Muddy Waters' career, Lomax packed recording technology into the back of his car and drove over to Waters' house on Stovall Plantation, before he had moved north to Chicago, to record him performing on his front porch. There are some awesome pictures of Lomax's vehicle packed with the recording gear in the boot, as well as Waters' cabin he lived in at the time, as they are both now presented at the Delta Blues Museum in Mississippi. Muddy Waters described the recording to Rolling Stone magazine in 1978 as, quote, "He brought his stuff down and recorded me right in my house, and when he played back the first song, I sounded just like anybody's records. Man, you don't know how I felt that Saturday afternoon when I heard that voice and it was my own voice." You can hear the original recordings and interviews on the record Muddy Waters, the complete plantation recordings. Waters' cabin, also kept in the museum, has an awesome story behind it too. ZZ Top's guitarist Billy Gibbons, who was a huge fan of Muddy Waters, heard that Sid Graves, the director of the museum, was heading down to Waters' cabin to inspect it when it had been requested to be demolished. Realizing the historical significance of the cabin Muddy Waters grew up in and first recorded at, Graves wanted to find a way to preserve the cabin and show it at the museum. Gibbons accompanied Graves on the trip to the cabin, where Graves offered him a piece of the timber that had fallen off the cabin there to keep as a souvenir. After speaking with the Pyramid Guitar Company, Gibbons turned the piece of wood into a guitar called the Muddy Wood and donated it back to the museum, where it's still on display today. So there we have 5 mobile recording studios. Please do comment below if there's any that you can think of which I didn't include in this video, or just if there's any topics you'd like me to cover in future videos. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Please subscribe if you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you in a couple weeks for another video. Cheers!